Hey everyone, welcome back to another Web Dev Junkie video. My name is Cody Seibert, and in this video I'm going to be showing you some basic authentication using JWT, and also I'm going to be using Vue and Vuex to kind of keep track of that user token on the front end, and on the back end I'm using Express. So if you're new to web development and you don't really know that much about how you do authentication or authorization, I would definitely stick around because I'm going to be covering that stuff in this little tutorial. And secondly, this is the live coding, so I'm going to probably run into bugs as I kind of code out what I'm trying to build. But basically what I'm trying to build, you all, if I go to, I think I have a diagram created that I forgot to show. So let me go to my Google Drive and go to this diagram that I created. This helps at all. I don't know if this helps, but basically we want to build a UI, if you kind of visualize this in your head, where you have a login form. The user enters a username and password that is then posted to an endpoint. So if you look at the numbers, 1, user opens the app, 2, show a login page, 3, user might submit that login form, which does a post request to a /login endpoint. So if you know anything about REST, this is kind of the convention I use, where the method is post at /login. So we're going to have a REST API written in Express hosted. That's basically going to take that username and password. It's going to check if the username and password kind of checks out, like if that is an actual user. We're not going to be using a database in this tutorial, so sorry if you're looking forward to like learning more about Mongo or MySQL or Postgres, whatever. We're going to mock out that functionality and just pretend like we have a set username and password that we're checking against. But anyway, so when the user posts that login information, we are going to then return a JWT, which is signed on the back end, and we're going to store that. Step 5, store that in Vuex, and then based on if the user has a login token, we might show a different page. Okay, so this is kind of the path that we're going to be taking in this tutorial. I don't know if this diagram helps at all, but it kind of illustrates the flow where user sees a login page, does login, gets back a JWT, stores that token in Vuex, and then you can access that maybe in a header or something else where you can like show the user information. So this is what we're going to try to build. Let's just go ahead and try our best at building it. So on the left here, I did already create a Vue application. So I used the Vue CLI to kind of create an app, and then I went ahead and started importing a couple of libraries. So the first library I imported is Vuex, and I have the Vuex store created down here with nothing in it. And this will come in handy when storing the JWT token or the user object. Second one I imported was Vue Router, and this is kind of useful for if you want to show like a login page or a home page, etc. And this is declared down here, where we basically have a bunch of routes that map the URL path to various Vue components. And we set those up down here in our Vue component, and then we mount that in. You know the drill. So all this, I basically just followed all the documentation on the Vue Router page, the Vuex page, the Vue page. Like, there's nothing special about how I set this stuff up. If you just follow their docs, they'll explain how this all works. And then in our app.vue, we have a router view, which is going to kind of dynamically change what view we're looking at. All right, so that was a mouthful of words. The last thing I want to talk about in this overview is I did go ahead and import Express and .env, where we have an Express server going with a simple /endpoint on port 3000. So if I open up a new tab to port 3000 and this should return me back some data. In fact, it doesn't because I haven't started it. So let me go ahead and start that. I think I have nodemon installed. Maybe not. npx nodemon server.js. Let's try that. All right, so at this point, Yeah, so this is, if you don't know what Express is, it's a little library to kind of host REST applications using Node. And this file, I mean, it's pretty simplistic. We just import it, we tell it what port to listen to, we tell it to return hello world when you hit the base URL, and then we listen on that port. So this, if you don't know this, hopefully you do know Express if you're watching this tutorial, but you're gonna probably learn more about this in a second. But all right, so I'm kind of just going off on a tangent here. So what do we need to do? All right, let's actually start building something instead of just talking about stuff. So we want to build a login form. So if you go back to this diagram, step one is user opens the app and then show a login page. So let's try to build that out. So if I go to my Explorer here and add in a new login.vue file and go ahead and scaffold that out, we want to build out a login form. So I'm just going to make a div here and put a login inside of it. And I want to basically add a route to our Vue router so that I can go to that login page, because right now there's no way to go to it. So if I go back to main.js, which is like, you know, the main file, the entry point to this whole application, we do have this router that we declared with Vue router. And one of the things you can pass to it, one of the properties you can pass to it, is a routes array. So let's add a new object and give it a path of /login, and the component will be a login component. Now we didn't import the login component yet, so let's just go up here and import it. So import login from components login.vue, and I think that's the capital L, so let's do that. So now hopefully if I go to /login, that takes us to that login component, and it does. Awesome. So the second thing that we probably want to do, you know, this probably shouldn't go to app. Let's just pretend this goes to like a welcome page. So let's make another component called welcome.vue and scaffold that out and say welcome, wrap that in some divs. And of course, we probably need to import that. So let's go ahead and import that welcome component. So now if I go to the base URL, we have welcome. And then if we go to login, it goes to login. Okay. So what we kind of want to do is probably on the welcome page, let's just say, if the user is not logged in, present a link that they can click to go to the login page. So I need to refresh my memory, so I'm going to go to view router, and I need to figure out how to make a view link. So there should be a way. Let's see, getting started. It looks like you can do a router link here. So let's just do this. Actually, I don't know if I need to import that. Router link. Let's just try it out. So I'm going to put a router link here, and I'm going to go to a login. And let's see what happens if we just go to the base welcome page. So we get a login link and we can go to it. Awesome. All right, so step one was user opens the app and show a login page. So we kind of didn't achieve that. Right now, it just kind of, I mean, I guess this works, right? Does that make sense? We have a link that goes to it. Good enough, I think. Oh no, I just closed out of that. I love when I do that. Let me open that back up. Sorry, y'all. I don't want to waste your time. Okay, anyway, so we are showing a login page, and we want to show a form. So again, what are we trying to do? We're trying to build a login form. So if we go here, we could probably wrap this in H1. Oops. All right, H1. And under the H1, let's just make a form. And inside the form, we're going to have a input box, maybe 2 input boxes. So the first input box is going to be a username, and the second one is going to be a password. So I'm going to say type password for the second one. Save this, and we get 2 input boxes here. And I'm just going to use placeholders. This isn't probably the best in terms of UX, but I'm going to just go ahead and do it because I want to save some time. Alright, so we got a login page, a username and password. Let's just add a break here. Looks a little bit better. Now, you could spend time on CSS. I'm not going to because I'm just trying to show you the logic behind all this stuff. So, we probably want a button. So I'm going to say button type is submit. And I'm going to say login. Alright, so at this point, when the user types in a username and password and clicks login, we need it to do something. And right now it's like refreshing the page because it's doing a default submit action. Alright, so what we could do here in Vue is we can keep state. So when the user types into input the username and password, we want to kind of store that in state somewhere. So if we go down to our actual like JavaScript Vue component, one of the things we can do is we could declare a data property, which is going to be a function that returns username and password. Return, not returns. Okay. And then secondly, you can bind your inputs to your data by doing a two-way binding, and I might have to refresh my memory as to how to do that, but I think you can just say value is equal to username. All right, let me load up the Vue thing down here and type in something. Route to login. I guess this is all we're going to say. Anonymous component, data, password, and username. So I'm going to actually have to look this up because I don't use Vue that often. So I'm going to say Vue two-way binding. How do you do that? Is Vue model. All right, so let's do that. Vue model. At least I think that's how you do it. Vue model message. Alright, so they say I should be able to verify this by doing 2 curly braces. And when I type into this, I'm just going to do a hard refresh. I think something is not. Okay, so this is working, but it's not. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong here. Input V model. Oh, you don't put the colons. That's why. Alright, there we go. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a Vue nub, so you should probably learn this from someone else. I just know enough to be dangerous. Alright, so now when I type into the username, we get this username data property down here. We want to do the same thing for password. So I'm going to go ahead and say password. And we want to, when the user tries to submit the form, we want to call a method. And I don't know how to do that, honestly. So let's just look it up. This is just going to be a big tutorial of me looking stuff up. So I hope that's okay with y'all. I'm assuming there's like a Vue submit. So I'm just going to kind of pretend like submit. It's going to call a method called submit. No, I'm going to call a method called login. Alright, so user is going to type in their username and password and then click the login button, which submits the form. And then that's going to call a method called login. And we're just going to console log here to make sure that we're getting here. So let's see if we are getting there. Login. So it does do here. Okay, so we probably want to, I think, like a dot prevent default. No. There's some. I think there's some way to like do that. But anyway, I think we probably get an e event, and we could say prevent default to prevent it from like refreshing the page. Bro, I can't type right now. Alright, so type in some stuff we got here. Alright, so this whole login page, basically I need to, once I get the username's password and username, we click login. We want to do an HTTP request to our backend. So at this point we should have access to the username and password, so we can say like this.username to get that stuff. But we want to make a request to our API, because that is what step 3 is. It says to do a post request to login. So using the fetch method, I'm going to figure out how to do that, because I don't remember. So here is an example of how to do post. You basically do all this stuff. You probably won't need all this, but we are going to try to just do it anyway. So we want to do a post request to our Express service. Headers, content type, applicate. I guess we might need that. I don't know. All right. Await will not work because we don't have async here. All right. So again, what are we trying to do? Do a post request to our /login. We don't have an actual login endpoint right now, so we're just going to pretend like we do and verify that we can actually do a request. So this fetch method, the first parameter is the URL that you want to do a request to. The second parameter is the object of what you're posting. Okay, so this basically defines what you're doing with the HTTP request. And the important part is the body. We want to pass a username and password, but we don't have access to that right now. So let's just go ahead and do that. So we could do username is this.username and password is this.password. All right, never save the passwords. All right, so if we have all this set up correctly, we should be able to type in like Bob Marley or something, click login, and that should do a request to our backend, which we don't have a login endpoint, so it actually crashes. But you can see down here in the request payload, we're trying to pass in a username of Bob and a password of Marley. Okay, so if you're not using Chrome, whatever you're using, you usually have a network tab where you can view like what network requests were being made. And this is just kind of inspecting. And one thing I noticed off the bat is that our API is hosted on port 3000. So we probably need to actually hard code that. So localhost 3000 /login. So now if I were to just try to do a login here, you're getting back what are we getting back? Well, it's just failing because I don't think we have that login URL created. So that is actually our next step, is we need to go into our Express service and actually accept this request. You know what? I see I posted 300 here. This actually needs to be 3000, so that is probably related to our issue. Okay, so we got a 404 not found. That is a better status code than what we got before. Anyway, like I said, we don't have a login endpoint, so if we go to our Express service, we want to make one. So I'm going to go ahead and change this default route to a post method. So in Express, this Express app object has a bunch of different methods like get, post, delete, patch, whatever. And basically by calling app.post, you're creating a new post endpoint. And then the first parameter is the URL, so I'm going to say login. And then we can send back some JSON here if we wanted to. So instead of saying hello world, I'm just going to say message was up. All right, so let's do that. So now if I click login here, we get back a 200 OK with the options, but our endpoint, for some reason, didn't return anything. So let's try to figure out why that is. It's probably CORS related. So if you ever see an issue like this has been blocked by CORS policy, this is because you need to actually install like a CORS module on Express. So there is a module that I can install. So I think it's called CORS. That's it. And while that's installing, I can import it. And I can say app.use CORS. Oh my gosh. So long story short, your browser has a security measure in place to prevent your browser from accessing URLs that don't match this. So because I'm trying to hit something at port 3000, it's stopping it. Unless your server has CORS enabled. Okay, so that is what we're doing here. We included the CORS package, and we are just telling Express to use CORS here. Okay, so let us restart our Express service and try to do that login one more time. And if this fails, then I don't know what's up. And it passed. So if I go to my login request, you can see here we got a message that says, "What's up?" So we're making some good progress, I hope. So now the next step is we probably want to check if the username and password that came in actually exists in a database. And in this case, we're just going to have some hard-coded username and password because I don't want to really waste time with dealing with a database. That could be for another tutorial, or you can figure that out yourself. But let's just assume that there is a hard-coded username and password that someone needs to provide in order to log in. So let's just make one. So I'm going to say username is Cody, and password is 123456. Okay. So what we want to do in this login thing is if someone provides a username of Cody and password of that, we want to say, okay, you're good to go. Otherwise, we want to throw an error. So in order to get that payload body that we sent in, remember we sent in a username and password, we can get that by saying rec.body and .password and also .username. So one thing I like to do is I just do array destructuring. So username password equal to rec.body. Let me just go ahead and delete that. Save that. Okay, so like we said, if they both equal what they're supposed to, if username is equal to username and password is equal to password, then we're good. Otherwise, someone is trying to log in with some bad information. We need to send back an error. So let us just go ahead and send back a bad status. So I'm going to say res.status. Res.status is equal to 403, and I can send back some JSON that says like invalid login information. Okay, so if I try this again, so I tried to log in with ASDF and we got back a message that says invalid login information, and we got a 403 forbidden. So if you're building a production ready application, you probably display an alert here that says, hey, your login information is bad, but we're not, so let's just move on. So if we provided the good information, we're getting to the juicy part. This is the JWT part, which is probably the most interesting. So if you provided good login information and you checked your database, you grab the user from the database, you check the password that you provided against that user model, and everything checks out, what you want to do is you want to sign a JWT token. So we are getting to the meat and potatoes of this tutorial, and what we want to do is, I don't know if I have the JWT plugin installed, so let's see if we do. JSON, we do. So there's a package called JSON Web Token, which we probably should look at the docs because I don't know how to do this off the top of my head. But I think it's pretty simple. There's usually like a sign method. Sign. Okay, this is a good example here. So basically, with JWT, the user provides correct login information. You want to send back their user, send back a JWT that is signed. Okay, so we can just copy that code in. In fact, this one I'm going to pull up here. So import JSON Web Token package, which gives us a JWT object we can call. And what we want to do is we want to sign it with a unique password. Okay, so this is kind of your secret key. So my secret key. And in a real system, you probably don't want to hard code that. Like you probably have like a .env, or you could say like JWT key is equal to hello. And then you'd want to say like, oh, hello. Let's see, process.env.jwt key. Okay, does that make sense? It's kind of going off the screen here, but you want to provide that from your environment and not hard code it into your code. But basically, it's going to use that key when it cryptographically signs your... Actually, I don't know what it does behind the scenes. I don't know if it's cryptographic. But anyway, what we want to do here is, if you provide the correct username and password, typically what you want to do is you want to actually sign a user model or something like that. So let's just pretend we have like a user object, which we got back from the database, and those will typically have like a unique ID. Maybe we'll have like a name. So I'll just put, whoa, that's not what I want to do. So we'll name, we'll just say the name's Cody, and maybe a username could be Cody as well. But usually you'll get back a user object from the database, and that is what you want to sign, so that when you send it back to the UI or the client, they actually have some information. Like what you want to send back in the JWT token is anything you think that the user might need, and then also anything you know that the server will need. So for example, the ID is really important because when the server gets back a request with a token, we want to know what uniquely identifies that request. Okay, so you usually want to make sure you have like a unique ID in here. Anyway, so we sign that user object, we get back a token, and we want to send back that token and probably that user object to the front end. So if I were to log in successfully now with, let's see, Cody in 12345 and log in. If I go down here, notice that we did a request to that login endpoint and we got back a response. And in that response, we got a token and we also got a user. So one thing I wanted to show you all is this token is not encrypted. It's just a token. So if I go to a site here, jwt.io, you can enter this in your browser and scroll down and paste in your token, and this is going to decode your token or any other JWT token that you have and show you what the payload is. So again, this is kind of to demonstrate that this isn't some type of encrypted token that only the server knows about. Anyone who gets access to this token could hit your server with it and kind of pretend that they are your user ID of 1. So you got to be careful not to leak tokens, and typically tokens have an expiry time of like 30 minutes to an hour. And then also when you log in, you typically get a refresh token that you can use to refresh your JWT token every so often. So read up on that. I'm not going to cover that in this little overview tutorial. I'm just going to kind of brush the surface of JWT. but I'm sure when it comes to security, you want to kind of research all that stuff. All right, anyway, so our UI got back the token, and what we want to do now, if we look at our diagram, is we want to store that. Step 5 is store that token in Vuex. So let's see if we can kind of work towards that. So right here we did the fetch method, and we want to get back the token in the user and store that somewhere. So let's just go ahead and let's get that response back here. So let's say response is equal to that. Add async to the login method, and then get back the user and token from response.json. So the fetch method returns a response object that has our JSON method. It's kind of confusing. I kind of like using Axios better, but whatever. But anyway, just to verify that this is working, let's just log out user and token here. And go to my console, type in Cody and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And those are logging out. So we're good to go. What we want to do here is we want to store those in our store. So if you remember at the start of this tutorial, I talked about our Vuex store. So I think at this point it makes sense to store the user in the token here. So I'm going to say user null, token null. And we can use these to know if like we're logged in or not. If the token is null, then we're not logged in. If it's set to something, then we're probably logged in. Or it could be set to a token that's expired, and that's another story of like, anyway, that's a tangent. So we want to be able to dynamically set these things, okay? So we could add a mutation, and we could say set user, and that takes in a, I don't know, so let's just look that up. I totally forget how to use Vuex. It's been a while. Again, I work full-time in React, so I'm trying to refresh my memory. So this takes in state, and you want to mutate the state. So I can say state.user is equal to user. And I think you can provide a payload here. So after state, we could provide a payload of user. And secondly, we could make another mutation called set token. We could probably combine these into one method. I don't know. This works. Let's see. This is complaining because I'm using commas there instead of semicolons. So with Vuex, you have state, which is what you're trying to store. Mutations are methods that can be used to change the state. Getters are kind of like methods you use to compute state based on state, if that makes sense. And then actions are what you can call to do like asynchronous actions, which call mutations. So there might be a best practice that you should always call actions, but in our login component, let's just go ahead and call these two mutations here. So I'm going to go up here and I'm going to import a method called map mutations from Vuex. And with that, I think maybe it's called map mutation. I don't know. I gotta look that up. It's called map mutations with an S. And what we could do is inside of our methods, we could just map our mutations. So I'm gonna say map mutations, provide an array, and I'm gonna say set user and set token. All right, so that will provide us with these two methods that we define in our store here, and we can call them from inside our component. So let's just say this.set user equals user, this.set token is equal to, these aren't, I don't know why I'm calling them like they're properties. They're methods, so you need to actually call them like methods. All right, so let's check if this works. We added some code. Let's verify it. So if you have the Vue Chrome browser plugin installed, there should be like a, is this the Vuex? Yeah, there's a Vuex tab here, and that is what we want to check. So let's just go ahead and log in with a correct username and password, and notice that it did those two mutations. You see that it added the user and it added the token. Let me scroll up a little bit. Kind of forget, I gotta refresh my memory. So this is the state. We have the user object and we have the token, and after you log in, we probably want to redirect the user to a welcome page or something. So how do we do that? Let's see. View router dynamic route in JS. So I want to programmatically change the navigation. So I think we can say router.push. But where does router come from? It looks like it comes from this .router.push. Okay, so we should be able to navigate to slash the home page here. And let's see if that actually works. So let's type in Cody 1 2 3 4 5 6, click it, and we're back to the home page. So what we want to do now is, since we're logged in and we have this token stored, we don't want to show a login button anymore. Okay, so if I go back to I think there's a welcome component I created, welcome. If I go here, we want to dynamically show this link only when the user isn't logged in. So I could put I think it's a vif, and I could say is logged in. All right, so this is a good example of when you might want to use a getter function. So if we go back to main.js, we might want to have a getter called isLoggedIn. So isLoggedIn is a method that is going to return, basically return state.token double exclamation mark. So this will return true or false based on if the token is set or not. And then what we could do is, in the welcome component, we could do a map. What can we do? A map getters, I believe. All right, so let's go ahead and import a map getters from Vuex, and inside of methods, we're going to splat that. So map getters, and we want to map is logged in. So if the user is logged in, no, I don't know if I need to call this like a method. I guess we'll find out. So let's log in. Cody 1 2 3 4 5 6. Log in. It goes back to this login page, but we don't have. I think this needs to be a computed. Computeds. Computed. I think it's called computed. I don't even know at this point. I'm just trying stuff. Alright, view computeds. I might be mixing my frameworks up. No, it's called computed. So computed, map getters, is logged in. Yeah, let me go to the Vuex. Oh wow, zoomed out too far. Alright, so inside of getters, we have a getter that returns some stuff, and then you want to, inside of getters, you could put it here if you wanted to. Getters will also receive other getters. Alright, so map getters. Let's see where they do this. They do it in the computed, which is what I'm doing. You pass it the method name. And yeah, I mean, this should work. So maybe my vif isn't working correctly. Vif, and then the computed should be that. This should work. So yeah, I'm not really sure what's going on here. Alright, let's try logging in again. Vif we are logged in, then you show it. Okay, I think I just need to say if we're not logged in, then you show it. It's that. Okay, so silly mistake on my part, but basically only show certain things if the user is logged in or not. So I mean, that that kind of covers the gist of authentication. Like you log in, you get back a JWT token, you want to save that somewhere. So in our case, we saved it in our Vuex store. And then you can use that throughout your application to hide or show different things based if you're logged in or not. And then on further requests, you want to provide that JWT token in your headers. Okay, so that might be another tutorial. I don't know if I want to get into that in this tutorial, but basically, when you do a request to your backend, you have the ability to set headers. Okay, so now that you have a JWT token, whenever you're trying to hit an authorized endpoint, you're going to want to provide, you know what, I'll just go ahead and do this in this tutorial. So let's pretend like there's a button that when you click it, it's going to call a method called say hi, and this is just all for demonstration purposes. All right, so let's say there's a button that says say hi, and inside of this component there's a method which is going to do a fetch request to our backend, and it's going to hit a hi method. Okay, so in our, if I click this, let me go to my network tab and click it. Notice that it made a request to /hi, but we don't have that endpoint yet. So what I'm getting at here is I'm trying to show you how authentication works to an authenticated endpoint. So if we go here and I do a new endpoint that takes in a get method, and I'm going to call it hi, it has a rec and a res, and it's going to do something. Basically what we want to do is we want to get a header, which we haven't passed in. So let me go ahead and go here. Basically what I'm trying to get at is, now that you're authenticated, you have a JWT token, you want to send that in a header to further requests. So we can get that here. So I can say headers, authorization, if I could type authorization. And typically what you do is you do your authorization header is going to have a value of bearer and then your token here. So we don't have a token yet, so we need to do a map map state. I don't even know where you do a map state. Map state. Do you put that on computed? You do. Alright, so as long in here I could do a map state method, and we want to get back that token. So I could say token and pass it token. I think this should work. Let's see, map state. So now we should have access to that token, and whenever you try to click on that hi button, it should pass that as your authorization header. So let's just test that out and see. So I click say hi and go down here. We have authorization and our token exists in here. Okay. And it's complaining that we can't do a get request to /hi for some reason. I don't know why. I think I forgot to save this. So let's just do a rec.json of message yo. Alright, so I click say hi and we get back rec.json is not a function. Alright, so res.json. Let's try it again. Alright, we got back yo. So what I'm trying to get at with JWT is, with your authenticated endpoints, that is endpoints that require JWT authentication, typically what you want to do is you want to grab that header. So I could say like authorization is equal to rec.headers. So grab the authorization header, and then you want to get the token. All right, so typically you could say split it, so authorization.split, and then of course you want to do some type of error handling here. Okay, so people can send in whatever they want, so this will crash if you don't have the correct authorization header sent in. But anyway, you get the token, and then you want to verify that the token they sent in is actually a token that you signed from your server. So if you go back to the JWT library, I think there is a verify method. So I could say jwt.verify, and then you pass it the token that the user sent in their header, and then you pass it your secret key. So I'm going to pass it all this stuff. And I think this is asynchronous. It says synchronous if callback is not supplied. So I'm going to put const is valid. And if the user sent in a valid token, then we should send back, I don't know, yo. Else we need to send back a 403 and say res.json message invalid token. Or say like unauthorized. I don't know what status code that is. Unauthorized status code. It's a 401. Okay, so probably send back a 401 if the token is not valid. So let's try that out. Let's click say hi, and we get back a cannot read property split. I think rec.headers is actually lowercase for some reason in Express. Alright, so I click it, we got back the message yo, and that is because we do actually have a token supply. Now, if I were to go in and test this bad case where we don't have a valid token. So if I go to my store, I think I could probably change it somewhere. Is there a way to change the store in this stuff? I don't know if I can dynamically change state. Let's see if I can. I don't know. Alright, so let's just go ahead and change something. So I think the payload is this thing in the center. And if I were to change something in it, like delete some tokens. That doesn't work? Okay. Well, how about this? I'm going to refresh the page. And at this point, there should be no JWT token stored in Vuex. So if I were to try to click say hi, notice that we do get back, it says JWT malformed. Alright, so let me actually show you, let me hack at this. You know, what is the best way to demonstrate this? What is the best way to demonstrate this? You know, I could just hard code this here. Let's just hard code a bad token. Will that still complain? So it's kind of tricky because I need to actually supply you with a real JWT token, but just kind of modify it a little bit. So let me just modify this by deleting a couple of things. And now it's hard coded to send this in. So now when I click it, unexpected token in JSON at position, right? So our server is crashing for some reason. Unexpected token in JSON at position 53. Alright, so I don't think this is the best way to show you how this stuff works. What is the best way? I want to take a token and just change a little bit. So I think if I change this stuff and then try to use it, it should break. Maybe, I don't know. Invalid signature. Okay, so the JWT library, it looks like it throws errors if stuff is bad. Like if I were to sign this with a... Did I close out of JWT.io? I think I did. Okay, so what I am trying to do is let's just encrypt it with something else. This is the last thing I'm going to try, and then I'm going to give up. You can just take my word for it that this works. No, this doesn't work. Okay, so at some point there is, I guess this verify thing just crashes if you don't provide it a valid thing. I'm sure it talks about that somewhere. Decoded. Okay, synchronous. Yeah, so I didn't read the docs, but basically if you call verify and the token is bad, it's going to throw an exception, and that's why we keep seeing this bad stuff, because we are just basically passing in bad JWT tokens. That not is valid. I should probably just do this. Technically, you wrap this in a try-catch, and you would probably, on an error, you'd probably send back an error. Okay, so that's probably the better way to do your JWT logic. So we got back an error, but we probably want to say res.status is 401. Okay, so we get a 401 status code, but then we also get some information saying that the JWT is malformed. Yeah, so I'm going to wrap up this tutorial. So I'm going to do a quick recap of like what just happened here, because I don't feel like I explained it that well. You can be the judge of that. But basically, if we did a full recap. Alright, so I'm just going to give you a really full recap of everything we did. So we added a login component, which you can hit by going to /login. And we also added a login URL, or href, which only is if you're not logged in. So if you click on this, it goes to our login component. And this component is going to do a two-way data binding to our username and password, which we define in our data down here. So when a user types in their username and password and then clicks login, that calls a submit function here, which is going to call a login method down here. And that is going to make a request to our login endpoint using a post method. And we are also going to pass in that username and password. So if the user passes in the correct information, that is going to go to our server and hit our express login endpoint. And we're basically just checking if the username and password passed in matches this hard-coded username and password. And if it does, we are going to cryptographically sign, or sorry, I keep saying cryptographically. I don't really know what it's called, but we sign this user object using a secret key, and then we send back that user in token to the client. So if you successfully logged in, you'll get back that user in token, and then we're basically setting these on our Vuex store using mutations. So if I go back to main, remember we created two mutations here, which are basically just used for setting the state variables. And then we redirect the URL to / which is our welcome page. So if I click on login, it goes to our welcome page, where we then have a button where we can click that does another request. So to kind of demonstrate the whole authorization header, sorry, we created this button, and when you click it, it does a GET request to /hi, and it's going to provide an authorization header. So this is the convention you typically use as JWT. We have an authorization header, and then inside of that you have a value of bear space your token here. So we are able to access token because we use the map state to grab the state from Vuex, and then we send that to our hi endpoint, where we basically check the header, we get the token from the header, and then we call jwt.verify on that token using our secret key to make sure that the token is indeed valid. And if it is, we send back a yo message. So if I click on this, we get back yo. And if the token is invalid for whatever reason, maybe it's expired, maybe someone's trying to modified contents inside the token, or someone tried to create their own JWT token and send it to your API. If any of that stuff happens, you just basically send back the error with the 401 status code, and that's it. So that is the gist of this tutorial. I just wanted to touch the surface of how you do JWT authentication with Vue and Express, and then using Vuex to store that, to maybe dynamically hide and show different things. We've touched on a lot of different libraries and frameworks and features. So hopefully this was a good overview of how you tie all this stuff together. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns on how I explain something, or if I maybe didn't explain something good enough, leave me a message, leave me a comment. Maybe I'll respond to you, or maybe I'll make another video to kind of fill in those gaps that I might have left out. But I think I covered a lot of the basics of how JWT works, how authentication works. I didn't really cover authorization. Authorization is more of like checking if a user has a particular role and then like giving them access to certain things based on that role, but that's not too difficult to get going. Yeah, okay, so I'm going to wrap this tutorial. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.